There's a huge amount of change going on. It's going to affect everybody. So how do you move around in that? You know the problem's here. You know the problem's coming. So how do you move through the chaos would be the next question. It's the same stuff I was talking about moving into the food shortages, but now it's here. So then what's next? So for me, forecasting something out is more of a mark in time of events that's then moving to the next set of events. And I can see a fair few events in front. So when I see that first one, because I knew the food shortages were coming, because there was fertilizer shortages a year and a half ago they were talking about. That was CF Industries came out and said that there was going to be a fertilizer shortage globally. And then all you have to do is take it out what the planting season is, how much fertilizer each crop needs, and then you could target it down and go, well, corn uses the most fertilizer, so corn's going to be the thing most affected this year. In my days when I'm running the Adapt 2030 channel, I have to go through a lot of news feeds to find things. And I use an enormous amount of different resources, going over the traditional websites and then finding stuff on LinkedIn with more professionals, jumping over to Telegram, and gritting my teeth when I need to get into Facebook and look in there. There's a lot of comments and different things that we could use in our daily lives right now, especially where it looks like things are getting more expensive. And this video I'm working on today, I could not believe in Hanover, for example, they're cutting off all of the hot water for the city. There's going to be no hot water because they can't afford, with the natural gas prices, to boil water for public buildings, and they're going to turn the street lights off at night. Now, this is all happening from a 15, not 50, 15, like 14, 15% reduction in the natural gas usage in that city. So the EU wants to roll into this. 15% cut across all of Europe. But this is Hanover. They're the first city to start to make some moves. And Paris also, to see what's going to happen. So Paris is going to be turning off the lights in the evening. You wouldn't even pay me to go to Paris now. And no offense to the Parisians there. It's still a beautiful city. It's just a little too dangerous to walk around with all the muggings and just unbelievable crime happening already. That's with a lit city. Can you imagine when all the lights are turned out? It'd be Fallujah or something over there. It's going to get crazy. And the same thing. So Hanover, they're cutting the hot water and turning off the lights at night. Now in Ireland, they've prioritized 40 different groups to be able to get fuel during this cutoff time. Yeah, Sri Lanka's using a digital rationing card already to be able to access fuel. So you could stand in line all day, and if you don't have your digital rationing card, they're not going to sell it to you. They legally can't. And they got dudes with automatic weapons in every single gas station now. And you can see quickly how this is going to move over to all countries where there'll be dudes with automatic weapons in your supermarkets pretty soon by the end of the year here. So I'm saying things are going to get a little expensive and a little bit tweaked as we move forward. So all eyes on Europe. This will really be the good gauge for you here is if you're looking at Europe and seeing what will happen with when they cut the fuel supplies and liquids, and then they also cut the natural gas supply, which will then affect hot water. And see, they're doing it in the summer, so you don't really notice it. Because if your hot water stopped in the middle of winter, you would have a problem. You would have a serious problem. So what's going to happen? Are they not going to be able to wash their hands with hot water in the winter and some massive weird disease will pop out? Steve Forbes warns a big financial crisis incoming. Meanwhile, the Fed raised rates again with the single biggest rate hike in 4 decades. Economists are forecasting that the Fed will panic and pivot, and they're going to start cutting rates again in 2023. Gold's going to soar. That's why Wells Fargo, Bloomberg, Goldman Sachs all forecast gold well above $2,000 an ounce. Ask yourself, do you really think big government's going to stop spending and the Fed's going to stop printing money? Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel when you call. They're going to give you some great service. Patriot Gold Group has a no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver, and you may qualify for the no fee for life IRA.
on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020 to get your free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated IRA gold dealer for 6 years in a row, it'd be good to talk to them. 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
Another thing that's happening is landlords, if you're not in a government-sponsored building that can control that, that's on the government level. They have told largest landholders that have private apartments across different cities in Germany. So far, there's one company that has 490,000 apartments under their belt as owners and rent collectors. 500,000? That's insane. One company can own 500,000 rental apartments in a country of that size. And we're not talking about the States, we're talking about Germany. So they are now going to force everybody in their apartments. They're going to turn the heat down for them in the wintertime. And get this, they're planning for the heat to be at 17 degrees Celsius. And if you know Celsius degrees, when you convert that over, when it gets down to around 10 degrees, you're right at 50. So add a couple more degrees and you're seeing your breath in your house. That's why they didn't lower it to like 16, 15, 14. Because at that point, you literally can see the breath in the room you're in. And that's how cold they're going to take all apartments down to in Germany. And then that's basically living like a serf. And this is fully the Agenda 2030 thing being tested out right now, forced. And the limit of the electricity, they haven't really discussed that. I haven't found any numbers on that. But if they're going to do that with heating in the home, and this is all based on natural gas heating, that's where the smart meters would come in too. They could turn your heat down with a smart meter. So it doesn't matter if you're on natural gas or a smart meter and you're having electric delivered to the home. There's still got access to your comfort of life, and literal basic life need is controlled by a smart meter or a tap under centralized control. Where do we see this in the States, where they turned air conditioners down using smart meters, and the electrical grid did that? It's escaping me. It was in the States just a couple months ago, or even soon, a month and a half ago. They got really, really, really hot. Maybe it was in Texas. But the company itself, not the people, the electric company accessed everybody's power meters and thermostats on their homes, private homes, and went in and turned it down for them. That's like somebody breaking in your house and running up and then pressing in your air conditioner to make it warmer. Same, but different. Is there an intrusion? Is an intrusion? What happens if your political beliefs are not right and they actually turn your power off during the middle of winter? In Germany, you would die. And then what if you need a QR code to access the community heating centers and you don't have that because your politics is on the different side than what the regime would like you to have? So that's where it gets a little woo-woo. But so far, I am going to take it down that direction because I think that's where we're going. They want the split. You've seen it since, 2020? It's just marching forward. I mean, it hasn't pulled back even one iota. Now it seems like this whole agenda to 2030 is speeding up. These last 8 years are going to be amplified. It'll be like 50 years of change before in these last 8 years. We see how they're kind of accomplishing it. You got the food shortages coming in. You had the whole vaccine thing. As we come into all these changes, you can so that's like subset A of information, and just garner that. There's a huge amount of change going on. It's going to affect everybody. So how do you move around in that? So the problem's here, the problem's coming. So how do you move through the chaos would be the next question. Talking about it is the same stuff I was talking about moving into the food shortages, but now it's here, so then what's next? So for me, forecasting something out is more of a mark in time of events that's then moving to the next set of events. And I can see a fair few events in front. So when I see that first one, because I knew the food shortages were coming, because there was fertilizer shortages a year and a half ago, they were talking about it. It was CF Industries came out and said that there was going to be a fertilizer shortage globally. But this was like 8 months before farmers even get ready, at the end of the season to buy for the next year. So this was on the wholesale side where they were telling those out there, next time you get ready for major farmers to come in and buy for the autumn time, in preparation to season the fields, we won't have it at the volume. So that news release from CF Industries, one of the largest fertilizer producers on the planet, was strictly sent to businesses that deal in ag. Well, since I knew a few of those people, they sent me that and they go, you got to look at this thing. And then all they did was chase down the fertilizer shortages. And then, since it was right there on my radar, all you have to do is look off in the periphery and say, if this is going to be a major thing, then other little dots should pop up. And once you have that base reference point of info you're looking for, you just kind of set it aside. But it's on your mind in a file somewhere. You can make a quick folder on the desktop, look for fertilizer shortages, and then every time one of those articles comes up, you throw it in that file. But then once you start to see another one, you're like, okay, now I got 2. All right, now. But then when you get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and okay, this is starting to be a thing now where it's getting into CNBC, it's getting into some regular, what you consider news channels like Bloomberg on the business side of things. Now, when it gets there, it's for real. And then all you have to do is take it out for what the planting season is, how much fertilizer each crop needs. And then you could target it down and go, well, corn uses the most fertilizer, so corn's going to be the thing most affected this year. Okay. And then you go, all right, well, what's corn? What's corn used for? And you run off and look at corn, and it's well over 100 products. I found one chart with 182 different corn-derived products on it. So I use that as kind of a base model, and high fructose corn syrup, but then I'd have all these lines off of it where high fructose corn syrup was used in a product for like ice cream. It just listed a whole bunch of these things that they were in crackers. I can't believe high fructose corn syrup's in everything, fruit drinks, it's everywhere. So then I started to say, well, if the corn syrup's affected because the corn's affected, then how much more is the price of the things going to rise? So if you follow that chart all the way back in, then you find like the top 10 things that corn's made from. And then you make that your search, and then you go the top 10 things corn's made from. Because if you go to 5 different lists, you're going to get they're all not going to be exactly the same. They're going to vary a little bit. So after about 5 or 10 of those lists, looking at them, you're going to find 8 that are exactly the same on every list, or 7 of them, and that'll be fine. And then you got your full list there of this is going to be affected because of fertilizer shortages. The price of the corn's going to go up when they bring it to the silos, or they don't, or they get it to the futures exchange, or they don't, because the fuel supply is not going to allow the smooth delivery of crops from the fields this year. We got diesel shortages everywhere. You got DEF with the diesel exhaust fuel, which is an additive to stop the pollution coming out of diesel fuel on the trucks on the roads. Those of you from the 1970s and 80s watching the black smoke billow out of dual stacks. That was meant to stop that. Okay, so now every truck has to have that for the motor to run. And some of the older vehicles don't, but all the newer ones do. You actually have to have that fluid in the truck to mix, or your engine won't turn on because you don't have the mix of that fuel. The last 5 years has been that real turnover where that DEF has its own tank on the, what you consider 18-wheel rig to fill up, to blend with the fuel. Older trucks don't have that. You're supposed to carry it in an extra can and then pour it in. But, hey, your truck will still run with or without it on the older models, but the new ones, it'll actually turn itself off. So you think about all these people that just quit, sold their rigs, and they're out of the game. Diesel got too expensive, and the COVID lockdowns. The small business world evaporated. There's no small business, medium-sized business left. Mom and pop has been kicked to the curb. The only thing left are corporates now. So if they're going to be, it's not a government mandate, it's a corporate mandate, but every big corporation did it. So when it comes into there's only Sam's, Walmart, Costco, Aldi, maybe Kroger, and then that whole supermarket chain. Those are all controlled by corporations, not me and you. That's not a mom and pop. So if you need your digital ration card or whatever digital passport thing to go in, and they'll have the enforcers forced at the local level. So they'll know, our hands are off. We didn't make them. It's a corporate decision. They decide. Yeah, but they all lock step in unison. It's been like that for, since they were bringing sugar back from the Caribbean in the 1500s or something. Dutch East India, all the spice trade. That time, it has not changed since then. All the corporations march in lockstep. So wind back. Sometimes I go on those tangents, So the corn syrup, for example, is one major product made from corn. There's still some stored because it's a liquid and you can put it into the food grade barrels at 55-gallon drums, but the expiration date's quickly approaching on that. As sugar goes over that certain date, at least on the high fructose corn syrup. I'm not talking about granular sugar. I'm talking about you taking dent corn the stuff that you see made that makes ethanol, and you run a bunch of chemicals through it, and you change the chemical composition, and then you squeeze out what's left, that's high fructose corn syrup. It's a chemical process to remove the sugar out of it. It's not like, hey, let's just squeeze some corn, it's sweet corn, and we get some sweetness. They put it through an enormous amount of chemicals, and then they squeeze that, clean it up, and make it look clear. Again, the reason I tell you that, once that supply is gone, then really for them to come out and start manufacturing again, this is the problem. We don't have the natural gas in America either. And so many factories have shut down and processing. If we can't even get that field corn, like the animal feed corn, ethanol corn, dent corn is what it's called, D-E-N-T. And it's kind of corn that you get, and then they make high fructose corn syrup out of that. And cornstarch. And then the animal feed, too. You got emulsifiers. They use that as well. Corn oil, that's another one for cooking oils. A lot of people buy that, but they heat it at real high temperatures to get as much oil out of those beans as they possibly can. And that's why it's already broken chains by the time you get it, because they overheated it. Well, that's the same with the corn oil, because they need to do that to get the corn oil out of it. And the canola oil, too. Those little tiny black seeds, when they squeeze those, they need heat to break it. So those are already tainted oils anyway. So if you're going to buy anything, please go with like avocado oil or olive oil, because those are the types of oils that you'll need. I found some walnut oil was another one. Lard, you're going to want to pick up lots of lard. Duck fat's another one. And at Christmas, for those of us in the West here, you can pick up goose fat, which is a delicacy too. So duck fat should be available in almost any Asian supermarket in your city that you go to. The lard I found in Kroger, and it was in the oil section, but it was on a shelf in a little blue box. Throw those in the freezer, which I did, and that lard in the freezer will be good for about 5 years. So you got to think about the oils and try to find some that are not too contaminated with, or that not going to, if you live on those, they're not going to damage your body, I should say. So think about that for a second. If the fertilizer shortage is causing shortage of that, everything that's manufactured that goes on a supermarket shelf that has cornstarch in it, corn emulsifiers, corn oil, high fructose corn syrup, or corn itself as a flake. Sometimes they flake corn into things. Corn flakes, but that's more the human edible corn, but it still applies. The fertilizer has dented that production too. So whatever you might get in a supermarket that has any corn product in it is going to get really expensive or less and less available. And then all you have to do is go, all right, well, if they're going to have food shortages and their supermarkets are getting super expensive and people are breaking in, stealing food, which they will, because they're flash mobbing everything across everywhere now in the U.S., and it's like mom and pop stores that are still open. They're getting, beaten up at the counters, everything's stolen, things broken, and then they're just going to, I don't want the trouble anymore. So this is the trend. When the food gets super, super, super expensive and people can't afford it, they're going to flash mob supermarkets. Like, it's so easy to see that. They've ingrained flash mob into our consciousness for how long now? 2 years, maybe 3? It's flash mob, flash mob. Flash mob Gucci, it's a news story. Flash mob your supermarket, then there's food shortages. Then you need more guards. Then you need more security. Then you can see how it's going to move, and then you'll need a digital rationing card to get in there. But how do you get the digital rationing card, which loops me back into the heating and the control structure of a company that owns 490,000 apartment units that can control the tenants that they wrote a contract with. I don't remember in any contract where it says I can't turn up my heating in the winter. I don't remember that in a contract clause anywhere, in a rental contract I've ever signed in my whole life. That kind of control for the heat and water in a home is going to be at that same level for the control of access to food, because they go hand in hand. You can't have all this and then the food's just going to continue to arrive in bountiful supply. Do you think? No. And then you can mark that as another thing that you would start to look for is stories about food not being delivered because of, not protests, not yet, bottlenecks in fuel supply or bottlenecks in the warehouses themselves because they couldn't keep something heated or cooled enough and then something spoiled. You'll start to see a lot of those articles come out right now, ruining more food, explaining away why there's even less food. Refrigerators went down. It was too much draw on the grid, man. It's hot, and we got this 15% thing that we put on ourselves. And You could just stop playing the game right now and be like, no. But see, they're all part of this coordinated world order that wants to be implemented, so they're going to go down the same road. And that's another piece of information. When one country does it, they're all going to do it. What you do have to look at is the BRICS, who aren't going to do it. They're going to spin off in their own new world. And then the Western wants to play its facades over here and its little makeup games. And you can see where that's going to go. Your food, do you think it's going to keep coming in? Like, it's, love to think that. I really would. I would really be like, man, I would love it if there was bountiful diesel subsidized by the government to let our farmers and our truckers continue to deliver all the things that we used to consider daily necessities and comforts of life. We're coming to that base level of barely enough people to keep the lights on in society right now. And everything's being knocked down further. Access to foods. You can see the crumbling and the collapse in real time now. There's no delay anymore. And let me see if I pull a slide. I had a really interesting slide here that I thought was the make all break all for the video I was working on, because you got to combine these two things here. Now, Strauss and Howe, they wrote that book, The Fourth Turning, and that's their most famous book, The Fourth Turning. But did you know there's also another book they did prior to that back in 1990s called Generations? And this was the story about how generations were shaped by cycles and how cycles were then shaped by the generation. And you're going through this back and forth of 4 different times within times. So if you look at the fourth turning, you come to this unraveling period, this collapse period. And then you come into the crisis period, which we're definitely in right now. We are into the crisis. But then after the collapse, there's something called a founding period where everything's refound again. And they find their base again to restart the society or economy. Then the awakening is once everybody realizes that it truly is stable again, and we're off to the races again for the next 80 years. All right, so that takes a little bit of time to work itself through there. About 80 years, so 20 years per set of the cycle. So the crisis collapse is about a 20-year period. But at the same time, when we're born, they can break that into seasons of a person's life also. So spring would probably be 0 to 20, and I'll make it easy at like 83 to 85, 90 years old in the winter. But spring, generally, you're born, then you get to be 20 years old, and you move into summer, super fun, 21 to, say, 41. And then fall, 40 to 60-ish, and then winter, 60 up to anything else. During that time, if you lived into the winter and become 80 years old, you'll have seen every one of the sets of cycle inside Strauss and Howe's Generations or The Fourth Turning. It's like a Mayan wheel. These two overlay on each other. So you could be born in the spring, 0 to 20 years old, and you were born in the awakening period, and that'll be your life and that existence of that time. And you'll then, from the awakening, you'll go through the unraveling and then in the crisis period where we are now, but then you'll watch again the refounding that you didn't see during World War II. After that, the 1950s, 60s. But if you're in the summer and you were born during the crisis and unraveling right now and you're 20, you're going to go through that, and then you're going to go through the founding, the awakening, you'll watch everything come back up again, and then you'll start to see it unravel again, but you'll be the crazy grandparent telling all the grandkids how messed up everything is, and it's coming again. That's those people. See, I can already tell you that the next coolest, wildest grandparent generation will be those who are 20 and a little bit over right now that are going to go through the collapse, and they're going to watch it end, and they're going to see it sort of hit that flat point, and it's going to get rebuilt. And as it's rebuilding, man, the economy is going to go more bonkers than probably the 1940s and 50s after World War II. Like, they're going to watch and see and enjoy that whole upward rise where everybody got pulled up. Everybody. And then awakening, when you realize, wow, it's always like this. And that's when people get sloppy or lazy, which leads to the unraveling, and then we're at the crisis period where we see now. So if you're in the fall period, let's say you're 40 to 60 or whatever, you're in the crisis period, and you're going to see the end of the, you're going to go through this whole, you wipe out, but you're going to watch it come back up again. Because after it wipes out to nothing, it's going to restart itself, and you'll get to see that founding part. But those of you who are 60 or over, you're generally just going to see the crisis and the wipeout of what's about to happen. You won't get to see that next chapter. Because, that's another 40 years. These iterations are 20-year segments. But if you're already, 80 or 90, moving up another 20-year segment, or even 40 years to come in to then the middle of the founding period, or when it starts to be everybody understands it's over, you're not going to live that long to come into that from now for the next 40 years plus this one, almost 60 more years. That's just, unless you're incredibly lucky and can keep in mind when you're 120. But you see these overlapping different circles of time. And then that goes back to the generations, like wherever you're born and whatever segment you see, that shapes it. Because if you're born and the founding is coming and that whole generation is moving that direction, then that's the energy of it until it turns over. So the crisis now, everybody's seen it. So it's going to go faster because everybody knows it's happening now. Where do you sit? Because the crisis collapse period, at least using the Kondradev wave, was 2018. This will be the IT part of it. But 2018, when he pegged that as being the next top of the cycle, and then it collapses down through 2041. So you got to think about that. Where are you in your life right now, moving from 2022 to 2040, which is another 20 years. So somewhere in there, we're going to hit the bottom, and it's going to start coming back out into that founding phase. But we're talking a good 10, 15 years. Mentally put that through your head. I only grew up in like expansive times, never gone through a big contraction like a lot of the world has. But I've traveled a lot when I was younger, and I did get to see a lot of that. So for me to see it, it's still going to be shocking, but it's not going to be brand new shocking in any way, shape, or form. It will be for some, many, and it's going to just absolutely wreck their psyche. And I'm talking like psychosis, trauma that never change after like such a crisis. Because who was I talking to with Ransom when Shackleton, when their crew was shipwrecked on the ice, they finally got back to a whaling station. And once all the guys jumped off the boat all and at the same time and just ran up and started clubbing and killing every seal that was on the whole colony. You know, for the rest of the guys, they were just like the daily pets that came out, and you can check out the seals. They come every day, whatever. These guys are stranded on the ice with no food during the winter for that long. Like, whoa. And their behavior was very different. When they saw that huge, gigantic food source, every guy was jumping on that one. That's mine. This is food. The way that, I forget who was the captain that was actually on station at the whaling station that wrote, the way he was writing, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. And then it dawned on him that this is what becomes of shipwrecked mad in mind men. That's exactly what he described as they had turned mad in their minds. In the British sense, in the 1800s. Madness. Well, that same stuff's coming. So how will it